Apple TV's new show Constellation. Let's jump in to this one. This is your spoiler warning. There will be spoilers for the episode. So go watch the episode and come on back here. If you haven't seen my video for the first episode, I'll try and put that one right here. And you can go watch that and then come back and watch this one. Because this episode picks up right where the first episode leaves off. So Joe had just found Alice in a wardrobe in a different cabin and is running her back to the cabin that they're staying in. Alice looks tired. They get back to the cabin. Alice is freezing. So Joe puts her in a bath, uses all the hot water. And to make more hot water, she goes to boil water, leaving Alice in the bathtub. And when she's getting the water ready, she sees the reflection of Alice sleeping. And she turns, and sure enough, Alice is asleep in her bed. And she walks towards the bed and looks into the bathroom. And in the mirror, she can see the reflection of Alice in the tub. And she looks back at Alice in the bed and back to Alice in the tub. The Alice in bed gets up and asks her what she's doing. And Joe goes to the bathroom. We see the reflection, and she turns, and the bathtub is empty. And there's only the one girl there. Joe kisses her on the head and smells her. Says, "Don't smell like anything." She doesn't smell like her daughter. Where the other girl that was in the bathtub did smell like her daughter. So Joe panics and starts to look for her real daughter. And we jump back to the International Space Station where Joe is still trying to not die. 5 weeks ago. Joe comes to or looks at the time and realizes that she's lost a lot of time. So I don't know if she was passed out or just reality slipping. Who knows? But what she realizes is she only has 6 hours of oxygen remaining, and she has a 90-minute process that she has to go through to launch the thing. So she has to be done with the batteries, which takes 40 to 50 minutes each. And she's not sure she has enough time. And what the episode didn't really talk about is how she overcame that. And the way she overcame that is by using portable oxygen and working in the dark when the IIS was powered down. So it would be getting cold too. But we're going to let that one go. We come down to ground control where the Soyuz capsules are going to land in Kazakhstan. And we see Henry Caldera get off his jet. He's now arrived. And he is greeted by Irene, the Russian. And I do want to apologize. I moved the conversation that they have right here to my first video. Sorry about that. That was a big spoiler warning. We do find that they have no sign of life on the station, so they don't know if Joe's still alive or not. But this is when Irene and Henry talk about Irene's sister and Henry's brother. And Irene says that her sister's dead. Henry says he hasn't seen his brother. We have a lot to talk about with the brother here in just a couple of moments. So where are we? So as Joe is trying to work as fast as possible, she's a little freaked out because the bag that was over Paul's head, Paul is the deceased astronaut that is waiting in Soyuz 1. So she takes it and looks back down, and he's still there, of course, but his eyes are open. So she closes his eyes. And she, in going back to work, sees his severed arm. They had to amputate his arm, and it's still floating on the station. And when she touches his hand, she has the moment where she sees all of him for just a moment, which is, I think, very important. We also find out she begins receiving recorded messages from ground control because they can't talk in real time because a system's down and they can only record the message, send it, it downloads, plays. But she's going to have to figure out manually her re-entry trajectory. So to survive, she's going to have to get the batteries moved, launch the Soyuz capsule, manually figure out the trajectory from where she is to land. If you've never thought about it, what happens with something certainly the size of a Soyuz capsule, if you're not coming in at a steep enough angle, right, if the angle is too shallow, you'll just bounce like a stone across a lake, across the atmosphere, and never break in. And then, of course, if you come too steep, the friction gets too hot and you burn up, even with the heat shielding. So she has to do all that. And you can't just land anywhere on planet Earth. You sort of got to hit somewhere. People are going to look for you. So Joe is also recording messages and sending them back, or she's recording messages onto her iPad or onto her tablet. Since this show airs on Apple TV Plus, we're going to assume it's an iPad. Messages for her husband Magnus, for her daughter Alice. But she hears a roaring noise, and when she plays it back slowly, it sounds like Paul telling her to stop breathing. That's a weird thing to tell somebody, even if you are a ghost. So we briefly cut to an interview that's happening with, I'm going to say, quote unquote, Henry Caldera, who's in a full military uniform, being interviewed about the disaster on the International Space Station. And the interviewer brings up his ill-fated trip to the moon, where he had to bring back dead bodies himself. And he gets agitated and angry. And at the end of the interview, when he's addressed as Henry, he lashes out that he's Bud Caldera. I'm going to get through the synopsis and then we'll come back. So Joe gets done and she's ready. Her work is finished and she starts the launch process. And the countdown is going, and she gets to the point where she has to release the bolts that hold the thing to the space station, and they malfunction. So she's not going. She looks up in the manual how to overcome this fault, and it takes one crew member outside the hatch to do it and one crew member inside. So it needs two crew. She's one crew. And as she's trying to think of what to try, the fault is cleared and she launches. And she looks back at the space station as she's leaving, as her capsule is leaving, and she sees a figure, a shadow, but a figure of a person watching her go. We got to talk about that. So, but while that's happening on Earth, where they have no communications, they have a countdown going until the oxygen runs out, and the countdown reaches 0, and they have no evidence that anything's happening. Irene and Henry share a drink to Paul and Joe, their lost fallen comrades. But somehow, and we don't know how, they don't actually tell us how, they detect that the Soyuz capsule has entered the atmosphere. So they didn't detect it leave the space station, but somehow they detected it coming in. They establish contact with her and tell her that she's coming in too steep. She has to adjust her angle. She says, "This is all just ballistic. There's nothing I can do." And so she's off course, and the helicopters and airplanes and everybody goes to try and figure out where she's going to land. And everybody's looking, and finally the parachute opens and they can track, and they find it. So she's not too far, but she lands. The parachute drags the Soyuz capsule a little ways towards a cliff, of course. And then it comes to rest. She undoes her buckle, and of course it doesn't land straight up. And she opens the door, the hatch, and a wolf begins to enter. And she recoils, and when she opens her eyes again, the wolf is gone, and all the cars are arriving. All the rescue crew is there. Henry retrieves his experiment. Joe did bring back the NASA canister. Of course, I think I forgot to talk about the fact that there was a big conversation about whether or not they were going to bring it, whether or not they were going to waste the time. I thought it interesting that the European Space Administration, whatever, telling Joe NASA would like their experiment, but it is a NASA experiment. Don't risk your safety. Right? It's not ours. We don't care. They'd like it. If you can do it, great. If you can't, don't worry about it. Right? And it's just a reminder that, America has no status on the ISS. We'll send scientists. We have astronauts there, but we only catch a ride with somebody else, and everything happens because other people are helping us. Just a little thing they put in there like that. The canister, when Henry's looking at it, is beginning to glow. It's not glowing, like it is in the woods when Joe is hiding it in the cabin. It's not glowing like that yet, but so they get on the helicopters. They're sort of transport helicopters, and Joe's laying there, and Alice is holding her hand, and Alice blinks, and when she opens her eyes, she's alone. There's nobody else in the helicopter. No pilot, no mom, no dad, no nothing. And then we cut to Joe having the same moment where she's alone in the helicopter, and then she blinks and everybody's back. So we do briefly jump 5 weeks to the cabin again, where that Joe is looking for her daughter that smells right, her real daughter. She gets this daughter that's there bundled up, and they head out. She grabs she goes to the little shed and grabs the canister again. And they head off into the woods to try and find her real daughter. That's where episode 2 ends. So let's back up a little. Bud Caldera. So I'm not sure yet. Let me know in the comments what you think. Is Bud Caldera a manic episode of Henry when he's under pressure? Like, is that his nickname from the other? Or are there actually two? Because we never saw Henry in his uniform except for when he said he was Bud. And he's in Kazakhstan, but it could have been a Zoom call. That one's confusing me a little, which I think it's supposed to. Irene, I'm pretty sure, is, her alternate is the dead woman, cosmonaut. The part of that whole thing where, Henry will slip into Bud, or we'll see Bud in a mirror watching Henry, and Irene saying that her sister was dead, and Joe flipping between these two things. The part of it that's odd is that Alice seems to experience the same thing. Alice had everybody disappear from her. So there's something that's not necessarily tied to the space station or the experiment, or who knows, maybe the experiment actually did something that's bigger, or who knows what. So when Joe detached, luckily, magically, the bolt error cleared and she detached, the shadowy figure, I think, was Paul. I think there's two Paul. And there's dead Paul that was in the Soyuz capsule with her, and then alternate universe Paul that fixed the bolts and let her leave. I mean, it's a lot. Really confusing. So that's episode 2. Let me know in the comments what you're thinking about this. I'm digging it. I'll get episode 3 covered as soon as I can. And then, we'll try to do them on time for each coming episode. This is a good show, but for now, that's it for this one. I'm Sean. This is Sean's Take, and I'll see you next time.